UIC. Freedom the people of me. Hell yeah. Freedom the people of me. Yeah, yeah. Freedom the people of want. Freedom the people of need. Yeah, yeah. Freedom the people of want. Freedom the people of need. Yeah, yeah. Freedom the people of want. Freedom the people of need. Yeah, yeah. Real man a road. Now bow wolf in a tree grand a road. Now bow down to no demon a road. UIC when you see man a road, me say yeah. Real man a road. Now bow wolf in a tree grand a road. Now bow down to no demon a road. UIC when you see man a road. Ready for broke every chain. That when you free up the people, levitate. Jamaica member, you ever great. I feel burn up the fire upon every snake. Me give thanks in every way. God still a look down once see we safe. I see around the road long time. GLP and PMP I sell we out. Still I do the test even though we know the end result. If them coulda kill with them catch we and hang we know. No force no coercion, me freedom in a step. No want to rob we and kill we and feel them I go make it out. You know see the leeches, you know see the hands of the devil when him sleep with. You know see the leeches, you know see the hands of the devil when him sleep with. Yeah, yeah. Real man a road, now bow wolf.
Good evening. Welcome to another edition of UIC TV. This is David Patterson, President of UIC Jamaica. Tonight we're going to talk about minimum wage. This is really part two of the series which I started a night or so ago. I spoke about the minimum wage being a key a key aspect of the poverty. Minimum wage drives poverty in Jamaica. And tonight I'm going to talk more about how destructive the minimum wage is. And I've invited at least one young man to talk to me about it. I want to take all of your questions on the minimum wage tonight to explain why I am so against the minimum wage. And it's not a personal reason, it's a logical reason, it's an economic reason. Because the minimum wage really doesn't work the way you think it does, the way most people think it does. And it's actually quite harmful, quite destructive. And so I'm going to be exposing how destructive the minimum wage is and to give you an opportunity to ask me any questions you might have on the subject. I'm hearing that my microphone is low. I'm not quite sure why, but I'm going to increase my own personal volume and hopefully you can hear me better. Let me know, please, if you're still having trouble hearing me clearly. Is it better now? I hope it's much clearer now. Yeah. So today I saw on one economist speaking about the minimum wage. His name is Dr. Andre Horton, one of the young, what should be a brilliant mind in Jamaica. But I've always been concerned about Dr. Horton because for somebody who should be brilliant in economics, he doesn't seem to say the right things and explain the things to the Jamaican people. So I am going to try tonight to clarify and demystify some of the issues around this minimum wage. I see where Dr. Orton is saying an increase of $15,000 would have been more appropriate. It means that Dr. Orton has bought into the fallacy of the minimum wage, that he believes the lie, and even though he's an economist who should know better, is prepared to continue to deceive the Jamaican people as opposed to explain to Jamaicans that the minimum wage has been one of its most destructive tools of bad governance over the years. I know it is politically correct. It is politically useful to tell people that you're going to give them an increase in their pay, and it's easy for people to swallow. But it's a lie, it's deceptive, and it's destructive. So Dr. Orton and other leading economists around Jamaica have joined in the fallacy and have chosen not to explain to Jamaicans that the minimum wage is creating a massive, massive increase in poverty over the decades that the minimum wage has been in effect in Jamaica. Just ask yourself a simple question. If the minimum wage was good for us, why is it that things are getting harder and harder? No matter how many times we increase the minimum wage, we have to increase it again. So you must ask yourself the question, why? Why do we have to continuously increase the minimum wage? Why didn't it work the first time, or the second time, or the third time, or the fifth time, or the sixth time? How many times must we increase the minimum wage? Why do we need a minimum wage? Yes, I know you're thinking you need a minimum wage because if you don't have a minimum wage, those wicked capitalists would exploit workers, and as such, we need to have this basic floor below which no employer should go below because that would be horrible and wicked and cruel. And we want to make sure that we stamp that out. And so we're happy for a minimum wage. Well, I'm here to tell you tonight that that's a lie, it's a trick, and it's hurting Jamaica. It is destroying our young people. It is causing us to breed more and more criminals year after year after year. The impact is quite severe. And so tonight I have with me in the background, I'm going to bring him on shortly, one of our young guests, not youngest, but a young man who is candidate for one of the divisions in Manchester. So I've asked him on short notice to join me on this, so you can hear, just another voice, and he can help to ask some of the questions you might want to ask and can't get to ask it fully verbally, because we're all learning. I mean, I've been learning for years. Economics, finance, money. It's a topic that I've spent most of my life studying. I'm fascinated by the subject. I enjoy studying and understanding money. I think it's really unfortunate that our education system does not teach our children properly, if anything, about money except how to count it, and that they must look forward to going out and working for it. But I've taken the time to study it more carefully so that I could share with you, more in depth on the topic. So let me welcome to the studio Mr. Vincenzo Crawford. Good night, Mr. Crawford. How are you?
Good night, everybody. I am great so far, Mr. President. How are you doing today?
Wonderful. So, Mr. Crawford, for the first time, welcome to UIC Liberty TV. It's a pleasure to have you on. For the benefit of our viewers, could you just introduce yourself so they know who you are?
So my name is Vincenzo Crawford, and I am an educator. Also, I'm an entrepreneur for two businesses. I'm actually the council candidate for Christiana Manchester. I'm also the parish manager for Manchester overall. It's a pleasure to be here.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Mr. Crawford. And to all our viewers online, welcome to all of you. Ex-Jamaica, Jay, Joy Smith, Move Up, MB, welcome to all of you. Thank you for being on. And tonight you're going to get to ask all the questions you have about the minimum wage, and I'm going to do my best to answer them. Before we go any further, I want you to listen to a great economist, Walter Williams. I'm going to let him speak to you from the grave. Walter Williams is no longer walking above ground with us, but he has left some very incredible, deep thoughts on economics that I think we can all learn from. It just so happens that Walter Williams is also of African descent. So he's one of those great economists who happens to be looking like me and you. So Walter Williams is going to share with you briefly on the minimum wage and its impact, and then we're going to have a discussion where Mr. Crawford and myself will go into some more uh, deeper thoughts on the matter. So let's hear from uh, our good friend Walter Williams, what he has to say and share with us.
Most people in this town view the state and a lot of the government programs and taxation programs as aiding minorities and especially blacks. And you're making the argument in your writings for 30, 40 years and in your book that in fact policies like the minimum wage, the expansion of the welfare state have actually been a setback for minorities. How do you defend yourself against your critics?
Well, if you look at the minimum wage, most Americans support the minimum wage and increase in the minimum wage because they have good intentions. They think that, gee, it will help low-skilled people earn higher living. But when you look at public policy, you should not look at the intentions behind public policy. You should ask the question, what are the effects? And you can see the effect of the minimum wage law if you put yourself in the place of an employer and you say, and you have to pay $7.25 an hour to no matter whom you hire. Well then, would you hire a worker who is so unfortunate so as to have skills that would only enable him to produce $3 or $4 worth of value per hour? Well, most employers will look at that as a losing economic proposition. That is to pay somebody $7.25 when that somebody could only produce $4 worth of value per hour. And so the effect of the minimum wage law is to discriminate against the employment of low-skilled people. And if you look
But
at
wait a minute, those are the people who are going to get the minimum wage.
No, they're not going to get a job in the first place. That is, there's the lowest skilled people, the employer just will not hire them. Now, in the absence of a minimum wage law, if he could pay them $3 or $4 an hour, $5 an hour, well, they could be employed and they would learn something on the job. They get on-the-job training and ultimately be worth $7.25 or even more than that. So what the minimum wage law does, it cuts off the bottom rungs of the economic ladder. And if you look for the empirical evidence of this, you just look at our labor force and you see that the unemployment rate among teenagers is the highest. And teenagers are low skilled because they lack the experience, the maturity, and other attributes of adults. And among that group are black teenagers who not only share the handicaps of teenagers in general, but they share the additional handicaps of often going to rotten schools, getting fraudulent education, poor backgrounds, rotten neighborhoods, and early work experiences are very, very important for people who have this kind of background. Now, there's something else about the minimum wage law that nobody considers, and I point that out in a book I wrote in 1989. It's called South Africa's War Against Capitalism. And in that book, I do a study of labor markets in South Africa during its apartheid era. And I give citation after citation of racist unions in South Africa who would never have a black as a member, were the major supporters of minimum wage laws for blacks. And their stated reason was to make the wage high enough so that employers would not hire black workers, they would hire white workers. So it turns out that the minimum wage is the most effective tool in the arsenal of racists everywhere in the world. And let me just give one more example on minimum wage law. The first minimum wage law in our country was the Davis-Bacon Act of 1931. And the Davis-Bacon Act says that all workers in federally funded or federally assisted construction projects must be paid the prevailing wage. And if you look on page 6513 of the Congressional Record on March 31st, 1931, you'll see congressional testimony where congressmen will say, see that contractor over there? He brings cheap colored labor up from the South, puts them in cabins, and it's labor of that sort that has to compete, that white Americans are competing against. It was all kinds of testimony in support of the Davis Bacon Act that demonstrated that they wanted to keep blacks out of construction. And see, the tragedy of it is that the Davis Bacon Act is still on the books today. And another part of the tragedy is that black congressmen, they also support the Davis Bacon Act. Now, they support the Davis Bacon Act because unions want the Davis Bacon Act. Now, the people who support the Davis Bacon Act today, they're the same rhetoric. They use a more enlightened rhetoric in support of the Davis Bacon Act. But the minimum wage law, any kind of minimum or any kind of regulation on prices, it discriminates against less preferred people. I mean, if you ask the question, and one example I frequently give, talking about setting prices, any kind of price control, it discriminates against less preferred people. I often ask people, suppose you saw a fat, old, ugly, cigar-smoking man, and he's married to a beautiful young lady. What kind of prediction would you make about that man's income? You would guess that it's pretty high. And what is he doing? He's telling the beautiful young lady, look, I can't compete for your hand on the basis of a guy like Williams. So I'm going to offset my handicap by offering you a higher price. And so decent people might say, well, gee, is it fair for beautiful young ladies to treat fat, old, ugly, cigar-smoking men any differently than they treat handsome men? And they'll say no. And then you make a law saying that beautiful young ladies can't charge fat, old, ugly, cigar-smoking men higher prices than they charge handsome men. Then you say, well, then what happens to the probability of a fat, old, ugly, cigar-smoking man marrying a beautiful young lady? What you've done by regulating prices, you've taken away his most effective means of competing with the more preferred man by offering higher prices. And so that's the same thing when you regulate any price. You handicap less preferred people.
So if Jesse Jackson were here, or some of the more liberal economists, they would respond to what you're saying by saying, well, look, maybe some people will lose their jobs. But, you know, if you look at the statistics, a disproportionate share of the people who get minimum wage are blacks and Hispanics, minorities. And Walter Williams, you are denying these people a pay raise. And then they would ask you, and I want you to respond to this, they'd say, well, Walter Williams, do you want no minimum wage? I mean, should there be no minimum wage that you could pay someone 50 cents a dollar? You're just going to drive those wages down to the least common denominator.
Well, first of all, that'd be untrue, but I would answer the question, yeah, I would want no minimum wage, because what the minimum wage law does, I believe in people's right to contract and be able to engage in peaceable voluntary exchange at mutually beneficial or mutually agreeable terms. And the minimum wage law interferes with that. And matter of fact, the courts for a long time in the United States held that same position, that the minimum wage law violated the right of contract. And you look at the Children's Hospital versus Atkins case, and where the court said that it violated the freedom of contract. And it wasn't until the 1938, I believe, is West Coast Hotel versus Parish, I believe. That's the case where the court eventually said, well, gee, the minimum wage law is constitutional. But however, they were under threat of Roosevelt packing the court, so it was they say sometimes the switch in time that saved none.
Right.
And so I believe that people have the right to negotiate. And then also a lot of people say the minimum wage law is an anti-poverty device. It reduces poverty. Well, that doesn't even pass the smell test. I mean, because if it were an anti-poverty device, rather than our spending all these millions and billions of dollars in foreign aid, we just tell Bangladesh and Haiti, you could be rich like we are, just have a higher minimum wage. That's just utter nonsense. And then also, the empirical evidence on the minimum wage law, in 1948, the unemployment rate among black teenagers was 9.4%.
1948.
1948. The unemployment rate among white teenagers was like 10.2.
So it's
The labor,
lower.
it was
It's
lower.
lower for blacks than
Yeah,
whites.
and the labor force participation rates for black teenagers were greater than white teenagers. Matter of fact, it was 106%. And so you say, well, how come in 1948? Was there less discrimination? Is that why? Or were blacks more in 1948 higher skilled than whites? No, it was the minimum wage law.
There is no
Hold
sound,
on a
Mr.
second.
Patterson.
Sorry.
If you
I
can
was
hear me,
talking to
there
my,
is no sound.
well, yes, welcome back, Mr. Crawford. I know I lost you earlier. Before I launch into some stuff I want to say here, what are your thoughts on the minimum wage?
You know, Mr. Patterson, my thoughts on the minimum wage. When I left out of high school, I made a number of applications, a whole lot of applications, and many of them never got replied to. But for the ones that got replied to, when I went on those interviews, they were asking me if I have any experience. Now, I was stuck between I have some subjects, but I don't have any experience. And I had no idea that it's actually the minimum wage that was working against me. It's the minimum wage laws that was actually in my way. And I used to argue, how can I gain experience if I am not being given the opportunity? But I never understood that these persons, they had they were between a rock and a hard place, because they can't employ me on the account that they had to adhere to a standard, which is the minimum wage law. And so what they would recommend is for us to volunteer, and a stipend wasn't on the table. So that's my thoughts on the minimum wage law. You can read between the
Yeah,
lines there.
absolutely. And the employer was doing the right thing. The employer was worried because the employer could not hire you at any price less than what the government mandated. And so the best option for the employer was not to hire you. Even if the employer hired you on a stipend, you might become quickly disgruntled because you're going to say, oh, them a hire me and they pay me less than minimum wage. So you would have had a seed planted in your mind that's going to make you disgruntled from the very beginning. Now remember, you are coming fresh and green into the marketplace. The employer is going to have to train you and mold you to understand and build the competences and experiences that you need. Now, if you are paid minimum wage or less than minimum wage, whatever that number is, you are likely to benefit more than otherwise. Now, what we have done in Jamaica and many countries, but Jamaica is particularly our focus right now, what this has done, it has ensured that the vast majority of our young people coming out of high school who are not going to make it to college for one reason or another, it could be because of lack of money, or it could be because of lack of the core competencies for them to matriculate into a post-secondary program. Those youngsters will find that there are hardly any businesses who will be willing to hire them at the cost of even minimum wage because they're not at that productivity level yet. Now, the employer might be willing to take a chance. They might interview you and say, you know what, I like Mr. Crawford because he seems mannerable. He seems like if I give him the job, he will work hard and he will, understand and he will apply himself well and he will learn. So 5 or 6, Vincent, where the 5 of them might not even make one, to be honest. But he decides to hire them and give them a chance. And after the 3 months or 6 month probation, he might decide to keep 2 of them who shows promise. They prove themselves. And then he puts them at a bigger salary because they have proven themselves. But with the minimum wage and the cutoff, the risk of him doing that is too high because the cost he has to pay is very high. Now, somebody's out there thinking, but wait a minute, you can't pay people less than minimum wage. Remember who you're paying. You're talking about a child, 17, 16, 18. Them now have no experience. Most of them might even feel entitled. They might be rude. They might need a lot of chiseling, a lot of coaching, a lot of guidance, a lot of parenting by even the employer. And I'm talking from personal experience here. So the cost to you is really greater sometimes than the benefit of hiring them. But you're hoping to see if some good can come out of this young man or woman, right? And so you're going to invest some time in them and see if it can work out. But because of the cost that the government places on you, you opt not to bother. But here's the problem with that, Mr. Crawford. When you opt not to bother, you create now a larger pool of unemployed and a greater demand for job by people who are not prepared. And so now you can pull down the salary of those who are actually skilled and competent. You can pay them less because they will always feel threatened by the mass amount of unemployment. And you can now pay them less than you otherwise would because of the supposed competition that is there. And you do create competition because you, the big business, don't have enough jobs for all of the bright people. So now you get to pick and choose from the batch of bright people that are left, but you can pay them less because there's less jobs than those people available. Because once you've kept out the teenagers out of the market early, they would not have been there to help the small businesses to grow and expand and create competition to the big businesses to then create more jobs so that you now have a larger amount of jobs available for the brighter ones. And that would continue to expand the economy over time. So by this policy, they have been able to, one, create large amount of unemployment, especially among those who are lower skilled, pick from the best and the brightest from those who are higher skilled, pay them a lower price for the service that they do provide, and keep out the small businesses who would draw on even the lesser ones and use them to build up. And so over time, you have what you have in Jamaica. Watch me carefully. You end up with a Jamaica where a few businesses, top businesses exist. They get the best pick of the market. They get the best of the economy. And then the rest are left. Majority of the people now are low paid people or unemployed people or underemployed people. And you have a mass of young people who would have never ever gotten one job in their entire life, one sensible job in their entire life. So from 17-year-old, they couldn't get a job, a decent job, a job that is going to train them and get them to build the skills that they need. So they couldn't get a job. 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, all the way. So you meet a 40-year-old man who has never had a reasonable job that would have made him into somebody stable and sensible and well adjusted to the economy. Instead, he has learned only to hustle and is now prime target for all kind of criminal activities. And that is why in Jamaica we have such a high crime level, because the job market that we have created here allows only for a small amount of good positions, a large amount of unemployed, and it stifles small business because it kicks out that competition away from being able to compete against big business because they're priced out of the market. They can't access labor at the lower end to work them in and get to that bigger capacity. So they've been priced out of the market. We have suppressed small businesses. We have suppressed our young people, and we have given the big businesses the pick of the lot. What do you think about that? Sir Crawford, what are your thoughts?
Yes, I totally agree with you there. Because the funny thing is, nothing beats experience, right? And
Yes.
I'm sure that a lot of persons are actually saying, for instance, the individual in the chat who mentioned that without the minimum wage, anyone can pay anything, right?
Which is not
And get away with it. That is not necessary. The fact is, if you are in a company, for instance, let's say you volunteer, right, at a company, right, and you gain a certain amount of experience and skill set, right, that company will not let you go. I've seen many
exactly.
instances where companies actually offer to pay off a person's student loan or to pay a person's tuition because they may not be able to someone that is fresh to the job market. You understand? And so
Yeah.
it's going to be a case where once you're able to work and achieve that experience, because of course without a minimum wage law, volunteerism would be off the table. So you wouldn't necessarily, I guess, would it be a case where in the law would you cannot have a person work in your company without them getting paid, correct, Mr.
Yeah,
Patterson?
the law is set
Right,
up so that if you hire somebody below the minimum wage, you have broken the law and you go to jail.
right. So so basically, no, that is not what I'm asking. I'm saying let's a minimum wage. I digress a little bit. There's not a minimum wage law, right? To protect
Yeah.
persons from being abused, right? There would need to be, let's say, a law which suggests that you cannot hire someone without actually paying them, right? So this person would definitely have to
No,
say, okay, I'm going to
no.
volunteer
Crawford,
in order for them to actually give free service.
there's no need to have any law
Go ahead.
concerning there's no need to have any law concerning how much or if you pay somebody. What you need is a free society. I see Sunny Days saying, for example, that the minimum wage is a protection. But let's get this clear. Let's understand this clearly, right? What's happening here?
Right.
If you had no minimum wage, if you had no minimum wage at all, what would happen? Number one, there will be no employee, no potential employee would have a fixed number in their mind as to where they should be beginning their negotiations. That's number one. Number two, no employer would have the minimum wage as a crutch, as a basis for the start of the negotiation. Number three, every single employee would now recognize that they are in the driver's seat of determining what they want to do with their lives. What is going to happen is you're going to have now many persons from the age of 15, 16, or 17 having their first jobs as soon as possible, as soon as they wish to. So, for example, you might be living with your parents at 16, 17, and you decide to take a job. You're going to have more entrepreneurs, more small businesses able to hire somebody by negotiating what you and I might call whatever low wages. Those arrangements will create a proliferation of small businesses, a proliferation of experiences, a proliferation of opportunities. So now everybody will have many more opportunities to choose between. Now, as those small businesses mature, you're right, you're very right, Mr. Crawford. They're going to be very careful in how they treat their employees because they will want to keep the ones that are most productive and most effective at growing their business. And so, what you're going to have happening in a proper economy, which Jamaica could be and can be, you're now going to have employers competing for employees. And once you have employers competing for employees, this drives up wages. In Jamaica, the model that we have followed suppresses wages by creating artificial unemployment and blocking small businesses from lifting the economy up, right? And so the persons who are worried now about, not having a floor and thinking about exploitation, it's because they don't understand economics. You see, in economics, there's something called demand and supply. Every single employer will want the best employee for the lowest possible price. And every single employee will want the best job for the highest possible price. The competition between employers will cause every employer to want to hold on to the most productive persons in their company. Of course, they will first take the risk of hiring the 17-year-old or 16-year-old, but for a job where they can fit into that area. Then they will decide on that now 18 or 20-year-old or 21-year-old. No, I want to keep this one. I want to keep this one. And in order to keep this one or that one, they will have to pay them accordingly. Now, the problem we have is our colonial masters have taught us to be afraid of freedom. They have taught us to fear freedom and tell us that if we have freedom, it will lead to exploitation. When it is the reverse. It is the reverse. When you don't have freedom, it leads to exploitation. When you have government being able to set arbitrary laws, arbitrary mandates, whether it's a price mandate or it's a lockdown mandate or whatever, once you have government having the power to take away your freedom of choice and take away your freedom of speech and take away your freedom of movement, once you give government that power, which they should never have, then you have exploitation. Because now the politicians can play games just like the government is now doing. They are now exploiting the ignorance of the people of Jamaica. They're exploiting your lack of knowledge because they gave you a substandard education that made sure that you do not understand economics, you do not understand money, you do not understand finance, and then they take advantage of that by suffering you, suffocating you, and then when it pleases them, give you a fake increase, make you feel good, and then call elections, and then you go out and vote for them again so they can exploit you some more. That is the exploitation, not the lack of a minimum wage. Not having a minimum wage will not cause exploitation. What it will cause is for the people's minds to be opened up, for them to start to understand their true worth, for them to understand the connection between productivity and prosperity, and start to work for that, and stop depending on politicians to give them fake promises of prosperity while keeping them really stuck in poverty. That is what is going on here. But I'm getting heated. Back to you, Mr. Crawford. It looked like Mr. Crawford. Can you hear me? Go ahead. I'm not hearing you. Your mute is probably on. Unmute yourself.
No, I'm saying that is exactly where I was going. You hear me now?
Yes.
Oh, you know.
Yes, I am.
All right, great. So I'm saying that is where I was going. So I appreciate you clearing that. What I was trying to say is that without the minimum wage law, persons will not be forced by compulsory to actually volunteer for experience. Right. That is what I was trying to bring across. There will be an era of negotiation, because my experience when I use on interviews, right, is a case wherein they say, okay, it's an interview, but I tend to feel interrogated. There's never a negotiation as it relates to the salary that I'll be receiving. And if it's a
Yes,
case wherein
yes,
if they say, how does so and so sound? They give you a little bit above the minimum wage for you to feel good, right? You try to feel
exactly.
like you value more, to show them that you bring this to the table and you bring that to the table. They will discard you. You understand? So this is the
Absolutely.
minimum, and I'm sure that a lot of persons can actually relate to this.
Absolutely. You're a bit delayed, but you made a perfect point. And the point is that this minimum wage gives the employer an artificial starting point. It gives them a leveraging tool over the employees, and it also creates an unnecessary and artificial unemployment pool, which makes it risky for you to negotiate properly as an employee, right? Because now you're at risk of not being hired, and you have very limited options after that. And so, guess what they have done? These two political parties, they have kept our young people unemployed for years. They have made sure that we have very high youth unemployment in this country. They have single handedly created the mass criminality that we see in our country because they have given these young people no other options but to sit down at home or to engage in mischief and to become criminals over time. They have left many of our young girls to simply become baby mothers, having one, two, three, four, five children. They have left many of our boys to be careless, just hanging out on the sidewalk and sitting on the fences. And then they tell us that the family is responsible for the problem when they have created the problem. But let's take some questions. Let's see what we have on the table here. Um, MB says, what happens in a Jamaica with no minimum wage and high prices, cost of living? How will you balance the two? Okay, MB, increasing the minimum wage does not fix any of those problems. Like having a minimum wage does not cause prices to come down. It does not cause cost of living to come down, and it does not allow the person who have gotten the increase to be any better off. The only person who is better off when you have a minimum wage in place and a minimum wage increase is the person who actually has a job. Okay? So let's not focus on the minimum wage. Focus on the impact of the minimum wage,
Could I,
not the moral intent. The
could I dip
moral
in this,
intent is
Mr.
that,
Patterson?
yes, please go ahead. Yes,
Could I dip in this one? So
yes,
the value of one's dollar the dollar of your country is dependent on the overall productivity of the people, right? And productivity takes into play a significant part. A significant part of productivity in this context takes into consideration how many persons are actually employed within that country, right? How many persons are actually contributing to the economy? How many persons are contributing to the right? Now, if you increase the minimum wage, right, what you're doing is you're lowering the productivity of the country. Why are you low? How are you lowering the productivity? You have small businesses like a corner shop then that could actually have a person, a registered corner shop that could have a person in that little corner wholesaling to you. Let's say the minimum is not the minimum that's actually so a person who could manage a small business that could pay let's say $2. Now you put $2,000, business may have to person off. Yeah. Or hours. If that business was actually thinking about, let's say, employ a second person, they can no longer. You understand? And so what does that do? It cuts the productivity. It increases the rate of unemployment within your country. So how great is the minimum wage law?
Absolutely. And here's the problem. What they have done, they have tricked you. They have tricked us. The trick is this. We need the minimum wage because if we don't have the minimum wage, bad, wicked business people, capitalists are going to exploit you. We've shown that that is a lie. Without the minimum wage, no business can exploit you. You still have the choice to decide where you go. You will have greater opportunities to create businesses. You will have more flexibility in the labor market so that the market, the people, the community can adjust and do what they think best, which will create opportunity. So that fallacy about exploitation goes out the door. Now let's look at the other side of the equation. Right now, today, we have high unemployment. We have high prices or cost of living, and we do have employers who are exploiting the minimum wage, using the minimum wage to exploit the Jamaican people. Okay? So the minimum wage is being used as a method of exploiting the Jamaican people. It is not protecting you from exploitation. So now watch what is happening. You should ask yourself the question, what is the cause? What is the real cause of the continuous high cost of living? Why is it that the minimum wage of 20 years ago cannot apply today, for example? Why is it that a loaf of bread keeps getting more expensive? Why is it that your um, basic grocery basket keeps getting more expensive? Is it being solved by the minimum wage? Does having the minimum wage stop your cost of living from getting higher? No, it doesn't. So what you should say to yourself is, what is the cause of inflation? What is the cause of my cost of living keep going up? You should also ask yourself the question, why is it that I have so few employment options in my country? Why are there less opportunities? Why are our wages so significantly lower than similar positions in other countries? Why is it that more and more of our brightest people are migrating to other countries? Can the minimum wage fix that? No, it cannot. So you're asking the wrong question. When you're fighting for an increase in the minimum wage or fighting to keep the minimum wage, you're fighting the wrong problem. The problem you should be fighting is, what is wrong with our economy? What is wrong with our economy? And here's what is wrong with our economy. Our economy is wrong because it is not a true free market economy. That's number one. Our economy is managed and manipulated by 63 politicians controlled by the PSOJ of Jamaica and our foreign masters. So we don't have a truly free market economy that would allow we, the people, to be as effective and efficient and productive as possible because we have external forces, our politicians, the PSOJ, and the colonial masters manipulating our economy. They manipulate it through the minimum wage. They manipulate it through the international reserves, which manipulates the exchange rate. They manipulate it through import duties. They manipulate it by having boards and agencies which prevents us from being able to fully participate in our economy. For example, they prevent you from accessing technology at a cheaper price by adding significant duties on it, so you cannot get the technology to be able to build and compete with external parties because they have made it expensive to bring that technology and use it in your own business. They have also set up industrial boards which through corruption will prevent you from accessing certain markets fully. They use regulations, red tape, high fees, and all kinds of cobwebs to make your life difficult. Why do they do this? Because the purpose of these two major parties is to protect the interest of big business and to suppress small businesses. And they have successfully done this now for years, which is why small business try and fail, because their government makes it difficult. They make it very costly, very cumbersome, just very hard for you to be able to move from point A to point B. Even the government services, look at the services. The amount of trips you have to make to the tax office, the amount of long lines you have to stand up in, the amount of you have to get JP to stamp this and JP to stamp that, how difficult it is to open a bank account. Look at how tough they make your life normally. They are the problem. It's not that you don't need a minimum wage. What you need is a minimum government. You need a government which is going to get out of your business, get out of your way, and allow you to be able to be as productive and efficient, as effective as possible as you can be. And the sooner we can do that, shrink this government, cut out the high cost of government, and let that money stay in your pocket and allow you to create your own businesses, build your own businesses, form your partnerships, form your corporations without the government putting excessive red tapes and excessive costs on top of you and excessive bureaucracy on top of you. Get rid of all of that, and you will see how quickly the Jamaican people very, very quickly start to build and create businesses and turning out many, many, many jobs. But no, they won't allow that because they want 1 or 2 or 3% of them to control the wealth of this nation while pretending that they care about a so-called 28.5% minimum wage increase. You don't want no minimum wage. You want a maximum wage. You want to max out your potential. You want to have the freedom to choose for yourself who, when, where, and how you work, and you make that decision, and you're in charge of your income. You don't want a government messing around with your economy, because the more they mess with this, is the more they kill it. One more point before you talk, Mr. Crawford. Look at it. Every single industry that this government touches, when I say this, I mean the two parts of them. Every single industry they touch, mash up. Everyone. If you give them here Jamaica, they mash it up. If you give them banana, they mash it up. If you give them cocoa, they mash it up. If you give them sugarcane, they mash it up. Anything they touch, they mash it up. So what makes you think that you can trust them to deal with your economy and set a price for your wages? They're going to mash that up too, and that's what they have done. They have mashed up this economy, and they have caused our young people to be unemployed and can't find employment, while concentrating the wealth in the hands of a few oligarchs. And then these oligarchs come on TV and make big pronouncements. Oh, we think you should give them little people a 30% increase. Oh, we think maybe a $15,000 would be better. And they come with their big highfalutin self, with their big degrees, and all they're about is hypocritically mashing up this country while pretending to care about the people of Jamaica. Over to you, Mr. Crawford.
Yes, Mr. Patterson, I couldn't agree more, because it's pretty simple, you know. A person in the comments said that they made us scared. They made us scared of change. You understand?
Yes.
And you see, it's very simple. If you think about what makes our dollar, I said it before, but I was a little bit lengthy, so let me cut it in short. What makes our dollar stronger? What would make our dollar, the Jamaican dollar stronger? What would make this stronger is significantly attributed to the level of productivity within our country, right? And if we have low productivity, then, and every year we check, we recognize that we have more unemployment, what's going to happen? The dollar is going to continue sliding, right? Increasing the minimum wage will be weeding out persons who are actually coming from university with no experience. youths who are of high school with no experience. They will not have edge at all to negotiate any terms or any condition, right? And the last time I checked, if someone is actually just volunteering, it doesn't significant, it only benefits the person, the business. It doesn't benefit the person to actually increase their livelihood over time. You understand? So
Yes.
my
Yeah.
question to the people is, what use is the minimum wage? If we have low productivity, then we're going to have a weaker dollar. How do we get
Absolutely.
every person in Jamaica to be skilled, right? Skilled experience to the point that they can negotiate terms and conditions relative to remuneration?
Absolutely.
So that's a
So
question that
Crawford,
people should ask themselves.
you have just made the most salient point ever. And here's the point. Jamaica has a horrible, horrible education system. Okay? And that is a part of the problem because if we didn't have such a horrible education system, we would have a more productive labor force, as they call it. We would have more productive citizens. So what they've created is a large number of people seeking a minimum wage. They have created a large number of people seeking a minimum wage, as opposed to creating a large number of people who appreciate the need to achieve their maximum potential. You follow me? So when you go up on the road and you're talking with the young people, them, many of them are looking forward to government doing something for them, finding a way to give them. So when the government come and tell them, I'm going to give you a 28.5% increase, they ignorantly jump up and cheer because they actually think that the government is doing something for them. Let me tell you something. The government is doing nothing for you because even if tomorrow the government were to say minimum wage is $50,000 a week, not 9, not 7, not 15. If tomorrow the government should come and say minimum wage is now $50,000 a week, guess what? The government is not the one paying you. All of the small businesses that currently hire you would have to fire you because none of them could pay you $50,000 a week because the country itself has not developed sufficiently as a market. And why has the country not developed sufficiently as a market? Because two parties and their elites in the PSOJ, coupled with their foreign masters, have been raping this country. You should ask yourself this question. Why does Jamaica owe $2 trillion and so many of us are poor and can't find work? Where the money there? Where is that $2 trillion? Where did it go? If we owed $2 trillion and that $2 trillion was invested in real productive enterprises, you would have a massive amount of productivity going on, and you would have a massive amount of job opportunities available for young people, and you would have a lot of adults who are secure and comfortable in their financial position today. But right now, if you're 50 years old or 60 years old, you are worried sick because you have no pension. You're worried sick because you can't afford health insurance. You're worried sick because you can't pay the tuition for your child to go through university. Why? Because you have voted for two parties that don't care one bit about your personal development. You are just a means to an end. You, the Jamaican people, are simply the basis by which they're validated to be in government. You are simply the collateral that they put up to borrow money and then steal it and then offer up the collateral to pay back that money. We, the Jamaican people, have been duped, we have been tricked, we have been samfied, we have been led down a path that can only lead to destruction. And that's where we're headed. So every day you hear that fellow that we call Prime Minister and that fellow that we call opposition leader coming out and making their grand statement, they're lying to you, they're deceiving you. And right now, the only thought of the government is how they can trick you to vote for them in the next local government election. They don't care what is happening with you financially. They don't care what's happening with you socially. They don't care what's happening with you emotionally. They don't care what's going to happen to you 5 years, 10 years, 15 years from now. All they care about is what can we do strategically now to win the next election so that we can still be in power to control their tax dollar. That's all they care about. And so they're working very hard to see what kind of announcements we can make. Okay, let's give them a 28.5% increase. After we allowed our PSOJ friends to come out and say, give them a 30% increase. Let's play out this little emotional, mental manipulation, trickery, deceptive game with them again. Because we know them don't understand where we're going. We know them don't have a clue how the minimum wage will kill them. We know them don't have a clue why so much young people can't find work. We know them don't have a clue why so much small business can't get beyond the micro stage or the semi-small stage. We know that they don't have a clue how we're thieving them with the exchange rate international reserve system. They don't have a clue how we have given away their central bank and have given away 20.6 billion of their dollars to the banking cartels. They don't have a clue. And so, because I know they don't have a clue, this is what the Prime Minister is saying. Let's trick them up now. Let's give them some nice little things now. Let's roll back. Let's roll back the mandates we have been using to pressure them, take the foreign master's injection so that we can get the foreign master money and make us richer while we don't care what happens with their health later on. Let's roll back now. Let's do some things now to make them feel good because we popularity slipping. Yeah, our favorability ratings are going down. So how are we going to trick them now? What is the trick now? 20.8% minimum wage increase. Go to their community now and put up so-called free Wi-Fi. It cut off after we win the election. Yeah, let's go give them. Let's go build up a few little houses here and there and put it all over the place and say what we're doing a wonderful job. While most people can't afford a house and many young people will never own a house. But let's trick them up right now. Let's trick them up again. We have done it for 78 years. We can do it again. That's what they're saying. We have tricked them for 78 years. We can do it again. That is why CVM don't carry UIC. That is why TVJ don't carry UIC. That is why the Gleaner don't carry UIC. That is why the Observer don't carry UIC, because the moment that people get wind of the UIC and understand the message of freedom that we're preaching is the moment these two parties of 78 years would have lost their power and privilege to suck out the wealth of the Jamaican people while sending them down a path to perdition, because they do not care about the people of Jamaica. They don't care about Jamaica. That's why the Prime Minister invests in foreign exchange. He bets against Jamaica and he's winning. He have insider information and he uses the insider information to bet against the exchange rate of Jamaica and make himself richer by foreign exchange trading. That is why the Prime Minister of company outside of Jamaica to own his property, so he can avoid paying the taxes that we, the Jamaican people, have to pay. That is why the Prime Minister is getting wealthier and wealthier and wealthier, while the people of Jamaica are getting poorer and poorer and poorer by the minute. The time has come, my people, for us to stop allowing them to trick us. Don't make them fool us with this minimum wage. Don't make them fool us with the nice up they're going to do now, with the hope that we will forget what they've done to us and vote them in again. We must stop them. But Mr. Crawford, I'm getting heated. Back to you, sir.
I know you're very passionate about this, Mr. Patterson. You understand. After all, this is the People's Party, the Education Party, right? There's one more point. I think that would be my final point on the topic. To the Jamaican people, do we recognize that in Jamaica we have a system where skilled persons are actually being underpaid. Many skilled persons, they're actually being underpaid, right? That is actually a
Yes.
result of the minimum wage. Understand that skilled persons, they have no negotiating power. And when I look to my friend who is in Texas, right? He tells me, I think he's some interior decorator, something like that. He negotiates his terms and conditions. You understand? And then the employer that he's actually trying to be employed with, those who are trying to employ him will gauge his skill against other person's skill and to see whether or not his skill will match up to what he's actually asking for. He testifies to me on multiple occasions, right? That basically when a lot of times they turn him down and say, okay, no, we're not going to pay you this. And then 2 3 weeks, 1 month later, they call him back and say, okay, I think yeah, we're gonna take up on your offer. Not that he's gonna take up on their offer, they're going to take up on his offer, right?
Absolutely.
Match that to what the Jamaican economy looks like, right? You have persons who are very proficient. I know a lot of persons who are very proficient in certain skill areas, right? And they have to be subjected to a standard which is beneath their skill set, right? And that's and everybody should be able to see this. That is actually the minimum wage that is actually getting in the way of your progress. So
Absolutely.
the persons who are less skilled will be out of a job, right? And the persons who are more skilled will be underpaid because the persons who are more skilled, a person will set them to actually do the job that they should probably be employing a slightly less skilled person to do. You
Yes.
understand?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely. I'm hoping that people realize now clearly, um, it's not an immediate thing where they're looking at and trying to see. Somebody's asking the question. I saw it somewhere. They said, "Well, Mr. Patterson, what would you do now, right now, to fix the problem that we have, the problem of the high um, cost of living and the relative disparity between the cost of living and what people are earning? That's a real concern." And so they're asking now, what are you going to do about it? So they want the quick fix. They want the fix that says, listen, man, just increase my pay now. And what that does, we just kick the can down the road further. So we increase the minimum wage now because we think that is the solution. And then what do we do next? Because the problem won't be fixed. So when we get to the next junction again, when the cost of living again is greater than your earnings, what do we do then? Oh, we just increase it again then because that is the solution. But is it the solution? Right now, the $9,000 is already less than you need. The next increase will not come after this government win. After it win the local government election, which it's trying to call, but it can't call it yet until it get you to forget. So after it wins the local government election, remember I'm just win the other day. So you'll have to wait a minimum of another 3 years or so before this come up. By then, I'm going to try to find another trick to play on you. Before you know it, 10 years gone. And then they say, oh, we need to increase the minimum wage again. Hear what they're promising right now. They're promising you now. Now they're saying, we're going to now regularly increase the minimum wage. They're telling you that now. You know why they're telling you that now? Because they realize you're getting wiser. You still don't fully understand it, but you're getting wiser. So now they're going to make you a promise that they're going to regularly increase the minimum wage, right? What does regular mean? Every 4 years, every 5 years? What? Hold on. Haven't they made you other promises before? Haven't they made you other promises before? And why now? Why after 78 years of them being in power, they just now realize the need to so-called have regular increases in the minimum wage. I say this to say that it is all another trick. So here's what we need to do now to fix the problem. So you're saying, what do we need to do now? I mean, right now I'm suffering. Right now the cost of goods and services are much higher, and I want reprieve right now. So here's what they must do right now. Cut the GCT from 15% to 10% right now. Yeah? Immediately cut out the temporary gas tax that they added on some years ago and said it was temporary. Cut out that gas tax. I remember when gas price was way low, they still had that tax on. So they've been sucking money out of you. So let's cut the GCT from 15 to 10 and let's cut out the gas tax. And shrink the size of government to match the cost of living increase so that the government takes less money from you and gives you more of that money in your pocket. By the way, that would immediately start to bring down the inflation because the inflation is a government problem. It was created by the government, and it's because of the government why you have that problem. Secondarily, take back the Bank of Jamaica from the banking cartels and take back the $20.6 billion that you give them and immediately inject that into the low income strata of the country as a grant for the people to get back what you have stolen from them. And allow, by removing all of the fictitious regulations, all of the fraudulent regulations that are blocking small businesses, eliminate all of them and bring true competition to the market so that they can compete on even keel with big business and as a result create more jobs and have greater opportunities for increasing wages for the Jamaican people. That's what we need to do right now. And if we do that, we don't have to play the fake game of increasing minimum wage. Because I can tell you this, in 3 months' time, that extra $2,000 is worth nothing. In fact, the $9,000 right now is worth less than the $7,000 when it was announced in 2018. So the $9,000 is worth less than the $7,000 when it was announced in 2018. So you're not getting ahead. But I do understand the personal pain and optics as it is now. Right now, people are feeling pain and they want immediate relief, and they know that. And so the immediate relief must come from government tightening its belt, not government shifting that burden to small businesses by saying, you now must find two more extra $1,000 to pay a low skilled worker you're currently paying $7,000. It's a lie, by the way, because what they've done, the government, they have shifted the responsibility. When they give you a so-called $2,000 raise, they're not paying it. All they're saying is to the small man who have 2 employees in a small shop, 2 employees, they're low-skilled employees. Minimum wage should never be for an adult who has children and responsibilities at that level. Him have 2 young people in a shop, and him are paying the 2 of them right now $7,000 a week. It might even already be paying them $9,000 a week. Right now, I pay them that to keep them because they would have gone a long time. So I pay them $9,000. Now that minimum wage has been moved to $9,000, he will be pressured to go above that because before the person was happy that he was getting $2,000 more than minimum wage. Now that minimum wage gone up, him still I get $9,000. He might say, we can't be getting $9,000. So the pressure build up. But hold on. What does the man do with his small shop now? Him say, all right. Him say, okay, 9,000. So he work it out to know. Him say $9,000 a week. Okay? So I'm going to divide that by 40 hours a week. So I'm paying you $9,000 divided by 40 hours. He's paying you $225 an hour. So I say, all right, here what I'm going to do. I want to keep you. I'm not going to explain this to you and I'm working it out when I go home at night. So I take $7,000. Watch me carefully. So the calculator here. So I take $7,000 and then divide $7,000 by 225 And he said, okay, now I must make him work only 31 hours a week instead of 40 hours. So him cut your hours from 40 hours a week down to 31 hours a week. So him still only pay you $7,000 for the week. Okay? You follow me? And then him have to shift around the work now. So him shift around the work and him start to do more. So him going to more the work himself, right? More of the work himself and shift it around and you are right back to where you were. Or him look at the two of you that him have and him say, look at it. All right. I see, this one here work really very well. So I'm gonna keep him fully and give him the 9,000 instead of 7. I'm gonna keep him fully. And the other one, I'm gonna let him go. And so me and this one now going to try to see if we can manage the ship. So the owner will now spend more time in the business and get rid of one of the employees and keep the best of the lot. So the best of the lot will be happy. He will now have $9,000 a week. But the worst of the lot will go from $7,000 a week to zero. Okay? Now, what you don't know and what you should know, the real minimum wage is zero. The real minimum wage is zero. And so this young man that was getting 7,000 now, and the other friend that he had at the same company that was getting 7,000 too, one will now be 9,000 and one will be zero. Yeah? And so the one with zero now, what does he do? Does he cheer and clap that the government has gotten rid of his job? Yeah? Now that's what's going to happen. And don't get me wrong now, I do want everybody to earn to their maximum potential. And that must be our focus. How do we get everybody to work to their maximum potential and thus be able to get paid at their maximum potential? The only way to do that is to create an economy which is truly free and open. An economy where we don't give big business the upper hand. They already have an advantage, they're big. But they're now getting a special advantage by government regulations being designed to give them a greater advantage over small business by government themselves crushing small businesses. Yes, Mr. Crawford, your thoughts?
Yes, a lot of those small businesses will not be able to operate because you will see it happening as time progresses, wherein you see a small business lay off one worker, and then after a while you recognize that this small business start to have less stocks until it kind of closed down, right? And we a lot of times this is attributed to bad management some of the times, but also it is attributed to the fact that the small business requires a certain amount of employee power, right? And they are not able to get those employees to carry out whatever task is needed. And so they have to, the manager or the owner of the business now has to try to balance family life
Yes.
plus the business. And it's just not working out, you see?
Yeah.
So who can actually afford to compete in this market? The
Only
private
business. Only
sector,
big business.
the
Yeah.
bigger
Only
businesses.
big.
You understand? So it's a lose-lose for both small businesses and poor people, and a
Yes.
win-win for the bigger business and the elites.
Absolutely. Many times,
Yeah.
Crawford, many times a small business owner may be somebody who is even a professional. He or she is working somewhere and getting an income way above minimum wage in relative terms, right? And he or she is an entrepreneur. So they start a little side business somewhere. They have a shop somewhere that they open, a fashion shop, for example. And this person who has a job, maybe he's a bank manager or a manager in a company somewhere. And so what they do now, they start a side business and they create a shop and they hire, say, 3 young girls, right? A young man and 2 young girls into the shop. And in Brighton, the guy that is a manager at, let's say, a bank, in Brighton, him know the think and reason and stuff. So him arrange and figure out a little business model and then buy him goods and get into the shop, whatever that shop is, whatever he's selling. And through his intellect, his extra intellect, he already have a job, he could just sit with the job and chill out, but he might try something. So he now create this company and him hire 3 people and it'll go on, it'll work, it'll go on, it'll go on and I build up little, and it might move on and now hire 4 person. Now these 4 person hire, most of them have 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 subjects, didn't get to go on to the university, life hard, them are sitting in a yard. And so now, thanks to him, him having bank job, but him decide to try a thing. Thanks to him, them have 4 of them have a job. They're not sitting on at home anymore. 2 of them might have a baby already. 2 girls them already have a baby. Maybe the guy have 2 people mother outside and they try, make ends meet. And the 4 of them now have a job. The margin on his apparels and whatever he's selling is tight. So remember now, him don't have to do this, him could just sit on a bank job and get him bank pay and just chill out and that's it. But he might try a thing because he want better for himself. He might try to build a house. You understand? And the bank job, the money from the bank job is not enough to let him move fast enough to build a house. So him start this business and the business is helping him now, right? The business are helping him. The business probably contribute. Let's say him pay every month. Let's say him getting a million. Let's say I'm in a good position, getting a million a month. Yeah, it's a good job, a really good job, getting a million a month. And this little business now add on another 100,000 or 200,000 a month, so I can do what I do, right? And he have these 4 people that he has employed. Now, without him, those 4 people would likely be unemployed. Okay? Now, he's paying them, let's say, close to minimum wage, between 7, 8, 9,000 and stuff. And because of government's decision, he now finds himself that his margins have now been significantly eroded by having 4 persons at the price in question. So his margin now drops from him getting $200,000 a month from this business. His margin now drops down to, let's say, $50,000 or $65,000 a month. And he said to himself, with all the hassle that I'm going through, am I to protect the store from people broken night? Am I to deal with bad employees? Am I to change them out every few months because them not show up to work? The headache and the stuff and all the hassle. So I'm just saying, you know what? We're done with it. I can't bother anymore. I'm just closed down. 4 jobs gone. Yes, the minimum wage is now 9,000, but those 4 people, zero now for them. And this is what people must understand. So minimum wage is not the answer. What is the answer? The answer for Jamaica is a truly free and fair market economy that allows that young man or that young woman at the bank to be able to build that little corner shop into a bigger and bigger enterprise that goes from hiring 1 person to 2 person to 4 person to 5 person. But who are the persons they're hiring? You might say, well, if the job can't pay more than minimum wage, it shouldn't be there. That's ridiculous. Because if we had enough jobs for the 500,000 young people who don't have a job, right? If we had enough low-paying jobs for the 500,000 young people that are there waiting for a job, if we had enough job for them today, they're not going to stay at that level. They come into this job, and hear what happens when they come into this job. They come into this job, Crawford, and they learn timekeeping, how to wake up early in the morning, dress themselves, prepare, and go to work. They then learn how to take instructions. They learn how to work in a team. They learn how to count money. They learn how to stock inventory. They learn how to follow a business process. They learn more and more skills. Some of them will then realize that they have good skills in accounting, so they shift into accounting. Now they have some experience, Remember, they never get much subject or whatever. While they're going there, they go back to school part-time and they build up and get them subject and get little money to help out their parents, and then they shift out. So they're not staying there. They're not staying at $7,000 a week or 6,000 or 9,000. It's temporary, and they grow up the ladder. So some gone to accounting, some gone to open their own business, some get a trade, and so on, and they move up the ladder. But by putting in this mental slavery system of people having the wrong conception of life, not realizing that their goal in life is not a minimum wage. Because what we have done, we have created a minimum wage population. A large population, which is looking forward to a minimum wage and waiting for a government to increase their earnings. It's not government who must increase your earnings. You must increase your earnings by your own productivity. You must realize that it's by productivity that you grow. You have some people, they show up to work and they think that because they show up to work, they should get paid. Because they simply showed up to work. Yeah? You don't get paid for showing up. You get paid for producing. And the more productive you become, is the more you should be paid. And if the person you're working for doesn't want to value your productivity, you want an economy where somebody else might value your productivity. You want an economy with enough opportunities that if employer one doesn't realize that you are valuable to his enterprise, employer two will realize that and quickly hire you. You don't want an economy where there are too few employers because the government has created an environment that suppresses small businesses and favors big businesses, which will only have a small number of opportunities, relatively speaking, because them having, the ability to hire 300 persons, that's not good enough. You want an economy with a broad-based productivity sector. Just imagine if Jamaica was this economy. Watch me. Suppose you had a large alternative energy production environment in Jamaica. Suppose you had massive organic farms across Jamaica. Suppose you had a more open tourist product, community-based, where the entire 14 parishes, all 228 divisions, all 6,300 subdivisions were so designed that they could take a larger influx of tourists because of how the country was managed. You had more tourists in the country. You had more agricultural products coming out of the country. You have greater advances in technology, alternative energy, solid state equipment being produced here. And don't tell me we can't do it because Singapore did it. Sometimes I hear people saying foolishness, Jamaica is too small. We don't have the capacity to be that big. No, we are 15 times bigger than Singapore. And Singapore is producing 200 times more than us. Why? Because their government got rid of political corruption. Their government made their society safe, clean, and orderly. And most importantly, their government produced a high quality education system so that when you leave school in Singapore, you're highly productive, highly intelligent, and very, very, very committed to living a dignified life because you were given that kind of schooling. While here in Jamaica, we produce low quality graduates year after year after year. We produce highly corrupt politicians year after year after year. We ensure that we have an unsafe society which stifles investment, and we ensure we have an unclean society which deranges the mind, and we have a very disorderly society which robs us of efficiency. That's what we need to fix and stop fooling up people with minimum wage. And by the way, Singapore has no minimum wage, and yet still they have become richer and richer and richer than Jamaica without a minimum wage. Why? Because of the things I said. Get rid of the political corruption, make Jamaica a safe country, make Jamaica a clean country, make Jamaica an orderly country, and most importantly, make sure we have the best quality education in this country if we want to be productive and prosperous. Mr. Crawford, we have now gone over our 30 minutes mark. You have the last word, sir.
Yes, Mr. Patterson, I think you're actually ending on a very great note, because it all comes down to education, right? We have an education system which actually we don't teach our future generation about money. We don't teach them so much about productivity. We don't even teach them about their rights and their responsibilities. You understand? We've removed stuff like civics from schools and all those things. So we now have a people that they are not quite privy to certain information, and they've gotten accustomed to what they have been fed by our government, which is through a colonial system. You understand? And so I must say that I really appreciate you for really, stepping forward, you understand, to educate the people. And I'm right there with you, sir.
Thank you very much, Mr. Crawford. Thanks to all of you who have been on tonight. I see some of you saying we need to have a bigger audience. Please share this with that audience. Let people know about the UIC. The government is not going to do it. The PSOJ is not going to do it. The media controlled by the government and the PSOJ is not going to do it. So you, my friends, you have to tell your fellow Jamaicans here at home and abroad. Spread the word. Let's take back our country. We can do it, and we must do it because our life and our future depend on it. Thank you very much. Have a good night and see you soon. Take care.